and welcome to Thursday's lesson. So today we are carrying on with decimals. So we're looking at hundredths again today. So if I just share my screen with you. Okay, so here's your mental maths questions. There's 5 questions. So you can pause the video and answer those on a piece of paper. And then when you unpause the video, on the next slide, you can see the answers. So here are the answers to the questions. I hope you did well with them. If not, and you've got any questions, you can message us and ask us to explain it to you. So today we're looking at decimals and we're looking at hundredths again today. So here's just a place value grid just to go over place value. So we've done a lot of work previously on thousands, hundreds, tens and ones. So these are whole numbers. And then after the decimal point here, you have got decimals, which are less than a whole. So you've got tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. We don't really need to worry about thousandths. We're just looking at tenths and hundredths today. So if you're going down this way of the place value, the numbers get smaller. If you go this way, the numbers get bigger. So just to recap, in terms of the deans, one of these represents a whole. Okay, and then this represents a tenth, and then these represent hundredths. So remember, here is one whole, and there are 100 parts to it. So this is a tenth of it, which would be that much of it, and these would be 100th of it. Okay, so in this picture, the girl has said that this picture here is showing 2.13. So the reason for that is you've got 2 whole numbers. So that is your ones. And then you've got 1/10. And then you've got 3 hundredths. Okay. So today I'm going to go through you looking at pictures and working out what the decimal number is from these pictures. So we've got some scales here, and here are all the scales. We're just looking at the red parts. So if you have a look, this is a whole, all of them are coloured in red, and this is a whole, so all of them are coloured in red. So this is 2 wholes, so 2 wholes goes in the ones column. And nothing else is coloured in. There's no tenths and there's no ones coloured in. So we're not looking at what's shaded in blue, we're looking at what's shaded in red. So there's just 2 whole numbers here. There's no tenths and there's no hundredths. So you can write it as 2, or you can write it as 2 and then the decimal place and put in 0 and 0. But you don't actually need these zeros because they're just placeholders. And then if we look at the next one, on this page, yeah, here. So here, all of the parts of this are shaded in red. So that's 1 whole. This, however, is not a whole because only some of it is shaded in red. So each one of these lines represents a tenth because there's 10 parts to it. If you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So each one of these lines is a tenth, and each one on its own is 100th. So I've got 1 whole here. This doesn't represent a whole because not all of it's shaded in. So I've got 1 whole that goes in my ones column. Then you've got your decimal point. I need to see how many tenths there are, so how many whole rows are coloured in here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 tenths coloured in red. And there are no hundredths because there's no just like 1 bit coloured in here. So there are no hundredths shaded in. Again, I don't necessarily need that 0 because it's a placeholder. So it's just 1.4 on the scale. And then if we look at this one here, this whole square is shaded in red. So that's 1 whole. This is all shaded in red. So that's 2 wholes. This is not all shaded in red, so that's not 3 wholes. So it's 2 whole numbers. That goes in my ones. decimal point always goes between the ones and the tenths. And then if you look, you've got the first row all shaded in red, but only part of the second row shaded in red. So the first row, because it's all shaded in, that's 1/10, because each row represents 10. So that whole row represents 10. So we've got 1/10 shaded in. And then a whole row hasn't been shaded in here. So we're going to count the hundredths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 5 hundredths have been shaded in red. So it's 2.15. Okay, and we've got another example. So we haven't got any whole numbers here, look, because that whole picture has not been shaded in, only part of it. So the 0 goes in the ones column because there's no whole numbers. And then you've got your decimal point. And then remember, each row represents a tenth. So that's 1/10, 2/10, not 3/10 because that whole row has not been shaded in. So we've got 2/10 because there's 2 rows and there's 10 in each one. And then we need to count how many hundredths there are. So 1, 2, 3 hundredths. I know they're hundredths because each dot represents a hundredth. So the answer to this one is 0.23. There's no holes coloured in. There's 2/10 coloured in. And there's 3 hundredths coloured in. And then another one, again, we've got a whole square coloured in and another whole square coloured in. This is not a whole square, so we've got 2 whole numbers, decimal point, and then if you have a look, there isn't a tenth, because for there to be a tenth, all of that would need to be shaded in red, but it isn't, so there's no tenth, so I still need to put a 0 in to show there are no tenths. And then there's 1, 2, 3 hundredths shaded in, so it's 2.03. Okay, so your activity today is going to look like this, and you have to write down, like I've just shown you in my examples, the decimal of what is shaded in. So I've separated each question with a line. So this is the first question. So remember, this represents a whole, and then because there's 100 pieces to it, and then each one of these represents a tenth, and then each single square represents a hundredth. So you need to, on a piece of paper, or you could do it on your actual work, I will put my place values. So you've got your ones, you've got your decimal point, you've got your tenths, and you've got your hundredths. Okay? And then what I would do is I would look how many whole squares are shaded in and put it in the ones. Then how many tenths are shaded in, put that in the tenths, and then how many hundredths are shaded in and write it in the hundredths. And then you do that for each question. So you've got 4 questions here. So here, how many holes are shaded in, how many tenths, and how many ones. Again, how many holes, how many tenths, and how many ones, hundredths, sorry. If you don't have any tenths or you don't have any hundredths, put 0 as the placeholder. You can't just leave a column empty. So that's what you do on that piece. Now, the next part to the activity is you're given the decimal and you need to shade in the decimal. So before, we were looking at the coloured parts and we were having to write the decimal from it. Now we're being given the decimal and we need to shade in the parts. So it says colour in 1.34. Well, first of all, I'm going to put my place value above it. That's the ones, that's the decimal place, that's the tenths, and that's the hundredths. Okay, so I know 1 whole square needs to be shaded in. Okay, I'm just going to do this very quickly. I'm just going to draw a line down. Or I could just squiggle it all like this. Doesn't really matter. So the whole thing is shaded in. Okay, you do need to. Doesn't matter that there's 2 holes there. It's telling me that 1 hole needs to be shaded in. And then it says 3/10. Well, I know these are my tenths because there's 10 pieces to it. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 3/10 need to be shaded in. So that's 1/10. That's 2/10. And that's 3/10. Then I'm going to look at my hundredths, and it says 4 hundredths need to be shaded in. These are my hundredths because each part is a hundredth. So each part makes up a whole, 100. So 4 of these need to be shaded in. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that is showing 1 whole, 3/10, and 4 hundredths. Do another example. We've got 2.05. So again, put my place value. That's my ones, decimal point, tenths, and hundredths. So tell me I need to shade in 2 wholes. So 1 whole, 2 wholes. No tenths need shading in, so I don't need to shade in any of these tenths, and 5 hundredths need shading in. 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll just check. 2 wholes. Yep, I shaded 2 wholes. No tenths, and 5 hundredths. So have a go at those activities. Make sure you put your place value above ones, decimal point, tenths, and hundredths, because that's going to help you. And if you need any extra help, message us on the blog. If not, I will speak to you tomorrow. Bye.